Welcome to another episode of Business with Passion. Each show features guests who have transformed their long-term passion into successful business. I'm your host, Jay Hamilton Roth. My marketing strategy business grew from my love of talking with passionate business owners. In this series, I share their insights with you. Today's episode features guests who are focused on giving back. Bruce Burtch is a nationally recognized cause marketing catalyst. He helps pair for-profit and non-profit organizations to develop win-win partnerships. And he's carved out this niche through cleverness and hard work.
I work with senior executives on both the non-profit and for-profit side, and I look at what their marketing objectives are. So I look at whether the nonprofit is trying to raise more funds for a particular service. On the for-profit side, they're looking to raise brand awareness, what they do in their community, and to sell things. So they have marketing objectives. I put those together into a cause marketing campaign. I bring the partners together, I make them understand what the goal and what their agendas are, and then we go out and we do something good for the community. So the secret to cause marketing, which is what I do and what I'm passionate about, is that it has to have a greater good beyond it. It has to be those two organizations that get a lot out of it together, but by coming together, they create something that neither one could have done by themselves. My dad was the son of a caretaker up in upstate New York, and he came from nothing, but he had everything because he had a lot of love in his family, and he had a lot of what he said, like paying his dues. He was successful, he was a man of his community, and I was always seeing him in his community and being respected for what he did. One of my earliest memories with my father was I was riding in a parade in Niles, Ohio, and Dad was sitting on the back of a convertible and waving to the crowd. And I was so proud of him, but he was the president of the school board at the time in Niles, Ohio. And so all through my life, I've watched how my dad helped his community because he wanted to do it, not for any benefit. And I also honestly saw what he got back from that, the love of his community. So I don't think there's a rivalry there, but I think there was an exceptional model put together where I saw this man give so much. And as I said, I'd say, Dad, why do you do so much? And he'd say, for all I've been given, all the blessings I've been given, it's paying my dues. I went to Ohio University. My sophomore year, I was honored to be offered a scholarship to Oxford University in England. I went to Trinity College on an English scholarship just for the summer period. And I was absolutely enamored the way they teach over there because it's a Don, it's a professor, but it's very personal. So the whole concept of the English teaching system, which they call the Oxford-Cambridge teaching system, is much different than it is in the United States. So I came back over here and I said, I was involved in the Honors College, and I said to the director, we should do that over here. We put together what became the Honors Tutorial College, which was the first college in the United States focused on the Oxford-Cambridge tutorial system. It opened in 1973 and has been running every year since. It now gives 26 degrees. So I came home from finishing all of that, and I didn't have a job. And so there's this amusement park up in Sandusky, Ohio, a fabulous big 118-year-old amusement park. So I walk up and I've got long hair and a mustache, and I walked in, it's a very clean-cut place, and I walked in and I said, I need a job. And the guy said, what have you been doing? And I told him, and he said, well, okay, cut your hair, cut your mustache, and come back. And so I came back a week later and I worked there. Phenomenal opportunity, family entertainment. I fell in love with it. I went up to the owner of the company, which is an older gentleman, Emil LaGrosse and George Roos, the two owners of the company. I said, I think you need someone whose official job it is to show celebrities around the park. And they said, you know, that's a pretty good idea. So I became the first guest relations host at Cedar Point, which became, as my understanding, the first guest relations host in the entire industry. My job was to show people around the park. So it was a great beginning. So I've always tried to find something that worked for the people I was working for, but fit my personality. So they went from guest relations host into becoming a publicist for Cedar Point. And I'm having a great time. It's a first-class operations. I'm meeting lots and lots of people. And all of a sudden, I get a call from Marriott Corporation. They were going to get into the theme park business. And they said, would you like to come out to Santa Clara, California and be our public affairs manager? Well, you know, I really had a good career going at Cedar Point, and they were building 2 parks, Marriott was, and they offered me the job of going to Gurnee, Illinois, outside of Chicago, or what they said was San Francisco, turned out to be Santa Clara. Obviously, I'm an Ohio boy that was really kind of looking to get out of Ohio, and I decided, okay, I wasn't ready to leave Cedar Point yet, but this was a huge opportunity. So I went to what was called Marriott's Great American Santa Clara. So I went to Great America as their public affairs manager. It was a fabulous opportunity to open what became the largest project in the history of Marriott Corporation. So then again, I'm there 2 years. I was into the second year. I'm doing promotions, public relations, helping with their advertising. I'm really enjoying my job. I was doing a promotion with a bunch of local Olympians because Santa Clara has the largest concentration of Olympians in the United States. And I met Bruce Jenner. And Bruce introduces me to the Olympic Committee, unbeknownst to me. So I get this phone call from the Olympic Committee saying, we would like to interview you for a job to do a special project in public relations, celebrity relations, and fundraising in the West Coast for the Olympic Committee. Well, the Olympic Committee, going into 1980 games, which were going to be in Moscow, and 1984 games, which were going to be in Los Angeles. So how could I pass that up? So I was having a great time. I was putting together concerts with Kenny Rogers. I put together a concert series with the Beach Boys, had a huge program with Neil Diamond, which was going to be called Diamond for Gold. I mean, I just thought it was the best thing I'd ever come up with, right? And all of a sudden, Russia invades Afghanistan. President Jimmy Carter cancels the Olympic Games, or at least the United States participation in it, and all of a sudden, I'm unemployed. I just had this big fancy card in my wallet that said, Public Relations Director, United States Olympic Committee. I have nothing to do. And I said, okay, well, I'll start my own public relations firm. Now, what's been running under my life story is these were phenomenal opportunities for such a young man, but my real dream was to own my own company. I never wanted to be the corporate man. I saw my dad be the corporate man his whole life, and I didn't really want to do that. So I put out my shingle, and it was B.W. Burtch, Public Relations Advertising. As the company grew, I changed the name to the William Bentley Agency, and it became the 20th largest PR advertising firm in the Bay Area. My goal with the William Bentley Agency was to introduce new things, and so I really worked on trying to be a very good public relations and advertising person, but I always, again, was motivated by the causes that was letting us do something that helped the public. We worked with the March of Dimes back then. I happened to be very honored to be the president of the San Francisco Special Olympics. At the time, it was the largest Special Olympics chapter in the United States. And so I was working with Levi and Wells Fargo, and I was bringing organizations together to help Special Olympics. So this whole idea of cause marketing, which is now the term, is just something I've naturally done because it made sense to me. Cause marketing is an economic benefit for both sides. Both sides win-win from this relationship. So I could see that very early in my life, is that if you bought the nonprofit and the for-profit together and they both win, well, not only do you have a good promotion or good event that year, but they'll want to come back and do it next year.
Bruce was here for a couple of years, and during those 2 years, he worked on some amazing projects. The first and really the reason we needed someone like Bruce was a program called Prepare Bay Area. And the goal for this project was to prepare 1 in 4 people, 1 million folks in the Bay Area, so that they would know what to do when the big one hits. And I got to tell you, we couldn't have been more fortunate than to bring somebody like Bruce on.
The major reason that the Prepare Bay Area campaign was so successful from a media standpoint is that we knew we had to cut through all the clutter. The complacency rate of having only 6% prepared was not that we don't all know that an earthquake could hit, it's that we weren't doing anything about it. So we got together with publicist Hal Riney, which is one of the top advertising agencies in the country, and they donated hundreds of thousands of creative time. Of course, I had a blast with this because I had like a whiteboard and these very bright people, and we got together and we just basically said, what could we do? And as a matter of fact, we came up with a campaign line that says, what do we have to do to get your attention? That wasn't the campaign line to the public, it was the one to ourselves. So the very first thing we did was we had a press conference at Justin Herman Plaza in front of Embarcadero Center. And we had hired a photographer to come out with a large format camera. He stood in the middle of the street, on Market Street, and he took a photograph of the ferry building. Then he turned around and took a photograph back on Market Street. And then he sent it to an artist in Germany, and he destroyed all the buildings on Market Street, and the ferry building tower is leaning over, and there's cars all on fire, but there was a crack that ran from the front door of the ferry building all the way down Market Street. We took this drawing that he made, and we put it on a 22-foot by 13-foot billboard and put it on the back of a truck. And we set it right smack in the middle of where he was standing to take the picture. Now, it's in your natural perspective, which was why it was designed that size. So you're walking out of the ferry building, and you hadn't felt anything, but you look straight ahead, and Market Street is destroyed. buildings are coming down, cars are upturned, there's an arc of electricity coming from the overhead lines for the streetcars, and people stop cold. Of course, if you were coming down Market Street and you're looking at the ferry building's tilted, there's flames coming out of it, cars are upturned, and people stopped cold, which was the idea was that we'd call it kind of our shock and awe campaign. Of course, when you're going to shock and awe people, you need to educate them too. So right next to this event, we had Red Cross booths with our volunteers passing out information about preparedness. But the one that really caused an international stir is at 5 o'clock in the morning, we went on Union Square, with permission of course, and we put a decal that was 60 feet long. And it ranged from a point out to 10 feet wide back to a point, and it was a crack. Now below Union Square in San Francisco is a parking garage. So we did the very same thing we did on the outdoor billboards. We made it photorealistic, as though big hunks of concrete had fallen down and cars were turned over and smoke was coming out. And then we put police stanchions around the entire thing and had people stay away from it. And the whole idea was that if you looked at it from a distance, it looked like Union Square had been cracked in half. We called the whole event Super Crack. Well, Super Crack photograph was on the front page of 9 Bay Area newspapers, hit every blog, national news, all over the place. And we knew that we needed to do these kind of crazy, wild, in-your-face guerrilla marketing things, which is something I really like to do, to get people to realize that this really could happen. I was extremely driven from an early age. My best friend says that I live in 5th gear. And I do. It's just my personality. And then I met this wonderful woman. And she hasn't slowed me down, but she's tethered me a little bit in a very, very good way. I was not married until I was 43 years old. And I think a part of that was because I was, from my waking moment to going to bed at night, I was either working or working with a nonprofit after work, doing something. I was driven in the community. And I make no apologies for that. But I really, while I was dating and having a fun time as a bachelor in San Francisco, I really was not in a relationship that was going to really help me from a soul standpoint. Janie has this sensibility about her where she can just temper me a little bit, just slow me down a little bit, which honestly, I can bulldoze more than I probably should. And it's made a wonderful marriage. She had 2 daughters. I always wanted to have my own children. And now I have 2 grandchildren. I have 2 little boys, and so 2 grandbabies. And I'm having a blast with that because this is the family I always wanted. And it's something I always needed because I didn't have that balance. I had the for-profit, I had the non-profit, I had the community, I was pretty well known, I was doing my thing. But inside Bruce, there was this huge hole, and Janie filled it. It's taken me 35 years to get to a point in my life where I could decide what I really want to do. I think I've been privileged to, I've done well while I did good. So I met that objective that I set when I was a young man. Great wealth and power, don't care anymore. Cared a lot when I was a young man, don't care anymore. I want to affect a lot of people. I really want the rest of my life dedicated to what I can do. I was given these talents and I want to use them to the best of my ability.
To me, the key strategic insights of Bruce Burtch's success are, first, his father set a strong role model of sharing his good fortune with his community. Secondly, he created high-profile win-win opportunities initially for him and his employer, and eventually even designed higher-profile win-win-win opportunities, combining a for-profit, a non-profit, and himself. And finally, he's evangelizing his cause marketing passion with the whole world. Our next guest, Jimmy Dillon, is a guitarist, singer-songwriter, teacher, and playwright. Growing up listening to a wide variety of music, he has since toured and recorded extensively, backing up great artists as well as forming his own bands. He is most proud of creating Blue Star music camps where he and other touring musicians pass on their years of performing experience by teaching kids rock and roll.
Well, I woke up this morning, I had trouble on my mind. Well, I got on my pony, took my rider by my side. I went looking for my baby. Walk a lonely mile, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Can I have an oh yeah? Oh yeah. Growing up in the 50s in Los Angeles was a little different than it is now. It was a great time to be there. My dad was in the movie business. I had a paper route. I'd deliver papers to recording studios. So I was around the whole cool Elvis 50s, you know. My first vinyl that I bought, I think, was Hit the Road Jack by Ray Charles. I had an older sister, and she played all these great records. So I grew up in the golden age of rock and roll in LA. And then when I turned 12, my dad's job moved to Chicago, and things changed radically for me. So I moved, here I am like this kid growing up with the beach and all that, and all of a sudden I'm living in Michigan. So it was like, what happened? You know, I didn't know what to do. But at that time, I actually saw a guy called Jamie Gillis. He came to our house, to our home, and it was during the folk music craze of the early 60s, if you will, about 64, I think it was. So I was 11 years old. And he played El Paso by Marty Robbins. And it's an unlikely song because you think about Bob Dylan and the Beatles and all that. But that song really grabbed me. I watched him play and sing and accompany himself on guitar. And I looked at my mom, I was sitting on the stairs, I remember, and I said, Mom, this is what I want to do with my life. And much to her credit, she sort of said, well, and I think she's thinking like Harvard Law, you know, whatever. And she said, well, if that's really what you want to do, you have to work for it. So I went out that summer and I mowed lawns all summer long, which was definitely not my MO. I was like a go to the beach kind of guy. But I guess I just been bit by the bug of music and guitar. So I went out there, and my mom, she was good to her word, and she matched the money I made that summer. And we drove down to South Bend, Indiana to Jack's Pawn Shop, J-A-X. And I walked in Jack's Pawn Shop, and there was this like whole wall of gorgeous guitars. And this guy, Jamie Gillis, who had promised to help me get a guitar, said, well, what do you think? And I said, I want that one. It was a red Les Paul Jr., you know, great guitar. So I went home that day, my mom matched me, and I had a little amp and a guitar, and I got home and I couldn't play a lick, but I had nice equipment. So that was the beginning of kind of my electric guitar experience. And from there I got into a little band called the Fugitives. So this was like basically 1965. We had the British Invasion, the Stones, the Beatles, you know, the Who, Clapton and Cream and all that. So, and Jimi Hendrix, let's not forget him. The very musicians who basically inspired Keith Richards and the Stones and all those guys, Clapton especially, were from Chicago, which I was living like, you know, my dad worked in Chicago. So I got to see Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters and all these great Chicago blues guys when I was just a young kid. And it soaked into me. The rest of the 70s was really moving back to Marin from Maui, which is a time that I met the guys in The Edge, which originally was called the Average Beach Band. We all met in Stinson Beach. And that was a really fun decade for me, if you will, because we had a real band. We lived kind of in the same neighborhood, and we wrote, and we stayed up late at night and just did all the things that crazy band people do. And it was the forming of a band. And even though we were regionally successful, just California, West Coast, did a couple tours with the Beach Boys, but it was fun because we really got to see the entirety of the creative process, from getting together, getting to know each other, find our way as musicians, finding the groove together, and then writing together, composing together, and then making a record, pre-CD, and then going out and playing the stuff live to people. Well, that's a complete circle there. I want to talk a little bit about the late 80s and the early 90s because for me it was an important time in my evolution as a musician. I met a guy called Clarence Clemons, the big man. You know, he's a sax player for Bruce Springsteen band. He lived in Marin for quite a while. Great saxophonist and a great presence, and he hired me as his musical director. And what does that mean? That means I actually called the songs, helped with the song list. In this case, I wrote most of the tunes. I did a lot of singing, but I was kind of, I just would direct the band. And this is a really valid, just a strong experience for me because as a musical director, I got to understand the entirety of performance, not just the playing, not just when I'm playing, but in the music business we call it having big ears. You got to hear and play at the same time and watch and lead. So when you watch like the David Letterman show or something like that, or any TV show where you have a guy that's a band leader, it's a special kind of thing. And I learned a lot about that with Clarence. And I also got to tour the world several times with him and play the big stages. Got a chance to play with Bruce Springsteen, which was really kind of a thrill. And we played the inauguration of Bill Clinton, which was that was fun. And what that led up to for me is we did several tours of Europe. And while touring Europe with Clarence, I kind of looked around, and in my own mind, I was saying, you know, I could do this. I want to do this. And what happened is I decided to leave Clarence's band. It was a wonderful experience, but it was time to strike out on my own. So my idea was I did my first CD. It was called Bad and Blue. And Bad and Blue is, you know, my sort of maiden voyage into the solo career. And on it, I had the Robert Cray Band as my rhythm section. Fantastic players, Kevin Hayes, Jimmy Pugh, and my good partner, Ozzy Allers, who was in the Edge with me. And then by the end of the 90s, you know, I'd sat in vans quite a few hours, and I'd done my touring, and I just kind of, you know how you have this feeling in your life where you want to make a change, but you don't know what it is. So the end of the 90s brought me back to the States, back to Mill Valley, and I had purchased a house on the lake in South Haven, Michigan, right on the beach, which is a beautiful little town. It's kind of the Martha's Vineyard of Chicago, if you will. And I have family there, my mom and my dad at the time, and my sister. So I went back there to visit, and I kind of fell in love with the place. And I thought, gee, I think I'll spend some time here and just see what happens. And I thought, I'd like to play the great theaters of the world. You know, I'd like to get out of the smoky clubs and like to do more of something maybe a little more multi-dimensional, if you will. And so what happened is I sat down at my computer on a very snowy New Year's Eve night, started typing away, and I wrote a musical called Ascension of the Blues. And my goal in writing Ascension of the Blues is I wanted to tell the story, because to my knowledge there had not been a really articulate piece of musical theater that told the story from the beginning of American music, which really starts in Africa, as we know. You know, roots music, the Great Crossing, and that told the story all the way through the decades for the last 100+ years to now, and how the blues is the roots and the rest is the fruits. I wanted to tell that story. So here's this like skinny Irish white guy telling the story of, you know, the blues, you know, I take my teeth out and find the blues. But the truth is, I got as much right as anybody, because I've been doing this, and we all get the blues. You know, blues is colorblind. So, and the operative word in Ascension of the Blues, in this story, was ascension. Not just the blues, but the ascension of the blues. What happened with that blues, and how did all this whole incredible legacy and treasure of American music come to be? Because I'll tell you, from traveling the world, America may not be that popular in all aspects, but our music is. People really, really have a romance with our music, especially in Europe, as you know. So anyway, I wrote this piece. I started typing away and writing it. I'd never done anything really truly theatrical before, you know, played stages. And so I started writing this thing, and I went around to Chicago, Detroit, and I started casting people. And I wrote this musical called Ascension of the Blues, and we did it one sweltering night, July 7th, 2000, in this old Baptist church that had been abandoned for 20 years. We got in there, and the fans are moving slow, the flies. I thought you felt like you were down in the South by the Big Muddy. And we did the performance, and it was fabulous. It was just an amazing experience to me. It was so stimulating and so provocative, and just, you know, all the things that happen on a musical theater stage as opposed to just a musical stage. So I got bit. I got really bit. And interestingly enough, and this is sort of, I always say, the twin spirits were born that night. When we did Ascension of the Blues, I also had an idea to start a music program for kids. And I wanted to have it be a nonprofit and reach out to kids that were at risk. And I wanted it to be a program where the teachers were all touring musicians, seasoned musicians that were really fluid in their craft, okay? Because kids need to have their hair blown back by real players, you know, they don't need, So I wanted it to be that. I wanted it to be performance driven, and I wanted it to be something that fostered what I call authentic originals. I want to see their story told. You know, I want you to find your true voice and show me what you got. And so that was the whole notion behind starting Blue Star Music Camp. So we built a theater in South Haven, Michigan from an old warehouse, and we started Blue Star Music Camp. And that was 9 years ago. And for me, Blue Star has been a culmination of all my experience in my musical journey, if you will. You know, as a player and a singer and a writer and now a playwright. So it's really quite a thrill for me to be able to pass that on to young kids, young musicians and singers and players. I've got a lot of friends in Marin, a lot of longtime deep friendships here, both musical and otherwise. And I would have to say the journey of being in a philanthropic circle, you know, like Blue Star, has really opened up acquaintances that I might not have ever met, you know, like people like Narada Michael Walden, who was a fabulous producer and drummer, You know, we've been brought together, you know, by doing efforts for the community. And Bonnie Raitt, and you know, I'm not just dropping names because they're famous people. These are people that have heart. We did a piece called Let the Sun Shine in a big event. And it was to benefit Christopher Rodriguez, who's unfortunately been shot in Oakland, and he's a music student, and also to benefit the San Francisco Conservatory of Music and also Blue Star Music Camp. So it was a great show. Sting was on it, you know, Keb Mo. There's a lot of great classic musicians, The Fifth Dimension. What a thrill to be able to not only come together with fabulous talent that is just mind-blowingly, you know, incredible, you know, to be on the stage with, but then to do it for a good cause. It really gives me hope to see a lot of that going on. This song I wrote for my cats, Kai and Max. It's called Maximus Kitty Boots. That's Maximus Kitty Boots. You can't give away what you don't have, first of all, okay? You gotta have the goods. You gotta be able to play, you gotta be able to sing. Ha ha! And so if you have the goods, and you have the inclination, and you have the, you know, not everybody's a teacher, but, you know, with Blue Star, one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to dispel the notion that those that can't do teach. You know, you've heard that, but it's not true. Because those that can do can also teach and can pass it on. In fact, I think they have a responsibility to do so.
To me, the key strategic insights of Jimmy Dillon's success are, first, he worked hard practicing and listening to a wide variety of music. Secondly, he continually pushed himself to try new things, first in a band, then as a band leader, a soloist, a producer, and a teacher. Lastly, as he's learned from others, he wants to pass on the experience of a touring musician to teens. Today's guests, by focusing on giving back, have helped their business and enriched the lives of everyone they've touched. I hope that this episode has given you many good ideas for increasing your business with passion.